Fast travel, or skip travel, or quick travel, or whatever the game decides to name it, is the mechanic that allows you to revisit places you've been to before, immediately rather than need to manually backtrack to the locale. I was thinking about this mechanic because the thing I'm reminded of was the fact of when it comes to like open world Spider-Man games, and how people think the idea of even having or using fast travel in those games bizarre because they find the traversal so entertaining to do, and it got me thinking about how many games use fast travel. Now, like I said, the whole point of the mechanic is because the act of going back usually takes so long that it's just a handy feature to do it more quickly if you so choose to. But then games like Spider-Man get praised for making the actual traversal more entertaining, which leads to some believing that fast travel isn't a necessary mechanic. What the developers need to do is make the act of traversal more enjoyable, but I feel like there are instances where that's not applicable. Like, there's just some games that are just so large that even if traversing it was entertaining, you would get bored of it eventually. Like, using Spider-Man as an example, typically Insomniac Spider-Man 2, yeah, web slinging, web wings, all the stuff you have is very enjoyable and they give you plenty of tools to work with, but the map is also way bigger than the previous titles, and there are points playing that game where I'd rather just fast travel because asking me to go from one side of the map to the other, even if the traversal is enjoyable, is something I just don't want to do because it's still too far of a distance to do, especially in a game where I'm using the traversal constantly because of stuff like the side activities in the game, you know? So there are cases where even if the mechanic is great, even if its ability to traverse is fantastic, there are still times where you just don't want to be bothered to do it. Another game that I've seen get praised for its ability to traversal is Infamous Second Son because of the powers Delsin has. Even as early as having smoke, you have ways to quickly get up to rooftops using ventilations, which is a great use of the power and great thinking on Sucker Punch to include that. But the other powers also have their own unique method of traversal, with the biggest highlight being Neon, since it can be upgraded to just allow you to just straight up run up buildings and everything. So it makes it the most de facto way of traversal, and it would mean you would want to seek out the environment to see where to get more Neon. But that's another thing about Second Son, the fact that you have to get the element from the environment. So on top of that, it also wants to keep you observant of what's in the area, so you know, oh, here's smoke, oh, here's neon, oh, here's concrete, actually not because of enemies, concrete sucks, or oh, here's pixels, stuff like that you can use to your advantage, which is a super cool way where not just add a traversal for each power, but it also means to pay attention to the environment to see where to even get the power to begin with, which definitely helps. Granted, this game doesn't have fast travel, at least last time I check, it does not. So the traversal better be good in order to make up for that one entire fact, and I'd say it definitely is, especially with Neon, which is the highest praise that it gets. Runner up would have to be Infamous Festival of Blood, where you just flat out have the ability to fly in that game. So traversal is just very well to do, although some would argue just speeding through the map isn't necessarily enjoying what the overworld has to bring to it, but there's activities that make you want to stop and do stuff, so I'd say it definitely works out if there's stuff the player is willing to do. A game that I am guilty of abusing the living hell out of fast travel for is Red Dead Redemption, because that game's map was just so big that I just didn't want to travel across. I know many love the horse-based mechanic and movement in that game, but I just wasn't the biggest fan of it, which was typically not for such long distances, so I'd rather just fast travel by setting up a campfire and immediately go into a locale. Although there was one instance where I did use that feature to fast travel to a major story moment, and later found out when I saw my brother play it that I should not have done that because it was actually a big moment in the game with a special music track playing to highlight the emphasis of the sequence, and I was allowed to just skip entirely over it just because that's all I've been doing the entire game. I just fast travel all over because I don't want to freaking use the horse and go around, so I just do that. So there was a moment where In hindsight, I'm surprised the game even let me do that with how controlly some Rockstar games tend to feel, but in this case, I pretty much screwed myself over by abusing the hell out of the mechanic. Even smaller games will tend to treat as requiring a fast travel mechanic of sorts, like say like Personas 3, 4, and 5, where Persona 3 only had a fast travel you talk to a student in the front of your class, that's about it. But aside from that, Persona 4 and 5 were the ones to introduce a fast travel system for places you've been to before and everything. With Persona 5 being the one that I abused the most because of how handy it was with the menus and everything being set up, so being the one I used the most. However, there is one segment where you are being followed by an NPC throughout it, and if you just fast travel all over the place, you may not even notice the NPCs even following you because of that fact, which I am guilty of, not noticing the NPC was following me the entire time. So in my playthrough, the NPC was Stealth Master because I just kept fast traveling because it was just more convenient to walking around. That's like a game known for any sort of particular movement in the overworld. And the Royal Edition did add the ability to run the overworld, but still not enough to make me actively walk around the place at all. Persona 4 as well, I would walk around a bit more because it is more condensed everything, so trying to get around isn't that bad, but still, despite how small their locales are, people still went, I need the ability to just immediately teleport to places. So it's one of those things where, regardless of the game's size, just because walking around isn't that enjoyable, even though those games have plenty of things to interact with, especially on 5, people just rather not, and it sucks because there's a lot of stuff being missed. Not just that one segment, the amount of NPCs talk, how NPCs talk before Distortion Their Heart, during it, and then after we get the Mementos target. Just a lot of details in the world that just get completely missed over because walking around talking to NPCs is like the most interesting thing in the world. Even NPCs can have their own entire character arcs. Now, the usual go-to method for a big game in order to have such traversal tends to be vehicles, which isn't a bad idea. It's like, well, Grand Theft Auto, we gotta do? Gotta drive cars. Saints Row, drive vehicles. But like I said, the problem is when the world is so big, you don't want to just drive all around all the time. Granted, Saints Row, especially Saints Row 3, does try to switch things up later to get access to more technologically advanced vehicles that can make the traversal way faster and everything, so there is that. Or you can strap like nitro to your cars, but considering how the highways are, I don't think I want to freaking blast my way through with nitro at all, because I feel like I'll just hurt myself more in the process. And then Saints Row 4 to give you superpowers, so the movement is way more controlled and crazy because you have effing superpowers on your hand. Like, you can just super jump, glide, run up buildings. The movement is amazing, and whoever did that must have hated the car person because of the fact of, hey, look at all these cars, everything that now just kind of go to waste because you have superpowers, everything, so. But hey, the movement is way better to where I've never seen anyone complain about the idea of needing a fast travel in Saints Row 4 specifically, or also Saints Row Gate of Hell, where you just have the ability to fly. Granted, you gotta do a lot in order to make the flight really worth it and useful. You wanna get upgrades, but once you have at least a fair amount, flying is very enjoyable to do. Well, once again, you could argue that the players just flying around the place, they may not be exactly interacting with the environment at all, but like I said in this case, the side activities have their own little markers and stop points, so there are things the player has to interact with, and in Gate of Hell, you kind of have to interact with them because side quests mandatory in that game. Same thing with Saints Row the 3rd actually, but it's one of those things where they get into the environment by putting the upgrade ores all over. Also Saints Row 4, just here's the stuff in your environment, go nuts with your movement, get the orbs, get stronger, everything. Although that becomes a problem of too many orbs makes going with the environment now actively repetitive and annoying seem a different problem entirely in those cases that people do cite. So there is no winning in those games. A game that honestly I'm surprised I really used to fast travel as much as I did would actually be Batman Arkham Origins. I'm surprised typically because I love the grapple boost in Arkham City, and I thought it made the traversal really fun, so Arkham City itself not being the biggest environment, so trying to get from one point to the other wasn't all that bad and everything, so the grapple boost was fantastic. Although Arkham Origins added a giant effing bridge in the middle of the map, to where trying to actively just use the grapple boost to get across it, sure, you can do it just fine, but it becomes so annoying and everything that you can see why they added a fast travel system, but it also highlights the fact of you put a giant goddamn bridge in the middle of your map and your band-aid solution is, oh, you can unlock fast travel. It's like, the grapple boost itself, being Batman flying through the air, is what should be the enjoyable part. If it becomes more annoying, you've lost the plot. It's like a Spider-Man game where web slinging is too annoying. Like, what is that? I know I said before how I sometimes use fast travel for Spider-Man, but that's just some instances where I think the distance is just too great. Batman Arkham Origins wants you to just keep going across the bridge repeatedly, and it's like, no, just no. And since I brought it up, some games do require needing to unlock the fast travel system. It has to be a reward for the player. That's how most games generally have it to where when we get to an area, you can now fast travel to that area because you've been there before. But some games require you to work for it, with a lot of games being so here's some sort of challenge to unlock it, like I mentioned Batman Arkham Origins, or Spider-Man 2, which requires you to get a certain threshold in that neighborhood before you get the reward of fast travel. Why is it gotta be a goddamn reward? And why is it second tier? Why isn't the first one? You know, one entire thing. Final Fantasy 15 has the car, but you either just have Ignis drive for you, in which case you're just sitting as a passenger, or you can just fast travel, which makes the car even more pointless. Or you can drive the car yourself, but you can't do anything in the car, just go in a straight line. Or you get to Regalia Type D, but why would you do that? Do you hate yourself? Do you hate yourself that much to consider to Regalia Type D? And speaking of Final Fantasy, generally in these Final Fantasy games generally have a fast travel system of sorts, but they would have the overworld have vehicles that you could use, like the trusty Chocobo in some games that would prevent enemy encounters as a handy way of just making it so you know encounters and you're moving a bit faster walking around. But you have entry like Final Fantasy IV, which has too many vehicles for its own good, because you have multiple airships, then you got the freaking little vehicle, that little hover machine, everything. Like, it was too much in that game. Which is why my favorite vehicle for the 5 is the airship in that game, because that airship is not only an airship that flies over stuff, it can also fly high above to the air. Granted, it's only used for one segment, but hey, it can do it! And it's also a submarine as well. Unlike some of Final Fantasy 3, that's a submarine, Final Fantasy 5 has it built into the airship, so you don't need to get out of it. It does it all. It does everything. On top of the fact that Final Fantasy 5's world is also designed to where you can go through the entire world on the Boko. Boko, the Chocobo, can go through the entire world map, and you're incentivized to do so because there is a reward for doing that, at least an even bigger reward. So that's what we're doing now in Final Fantasy 5, is the fact of the movement. It gives you so many ways to do it, and it gives you a reason to use it. You want to use a submarine because there's extra goodies to get later in the game. You want to use Boko because of the fact that there's an extra goodie for doing the challenge of going around the entire map on Boko. So there's stuff in Final Fantasy 5 that they give you for doing so. Generally, people, when it comes to vehicles, Final Fantasy be praised, most just praise the freaking highway in Final Fantasy 7, but honestly, it's just an airship. It doesn't really do anything unique, and you need to go to a separate submarine. You want to use that. So if it got more Final Fantasy 5's airship, I would count it as more interesting, but no, it just looks fancy and that's about it. It doesn't really offer much at all. So, but it's something people really enjoy, and they're excited to see when it comes to Final Fantasy 7, whatever Part 3 of the remake is called. Because Rebirth gives you fast travel points you unlocked via the most Ubisoft-ass do-a-tower method that's incredibly boring, and who the hell thought this? Oh my god, can this method effing die? Or freaking Part 3 has now built up to how to get the Highwind to work. How do we get that to use a big vehicle in this big world? That's up for developers to figure out, and they're struggling too. Almost as if they really didn't plan this trilogy at all. But hey, they're doing their best. But their best is always the best. Next up is the Kingdom Hearts franchise, which uses the gummy ship and will generally have you do a space battle before you reach the locale, which Kingdom Hearts 1's gummy ship's not being all that great, but Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3 having way better gummy ship battles that are more interesting to go through. Granted, I know some don't like it and would prefer they just skip to the level, since that's what they want to do, and I can't blame them since they just want to play an action RPG, and they want an action RPG thing. But, especially Kingdom Hearts 3, they decided to just also give a whole lot more side activity for gummy ship enjoyers to do, which was a nice incentive to add for people who enjoy that. And this whole entire system, once again, once you've been to a place, or at least have, like Kingdom Hearts 1, the gummy block that allows you fast travel, then you're able to just fast travel mini to a place, not need to redo the whole entire gummy ship section, which is a very handy way, and people really mention that as a fast travel system, since it's not the usual method of fast travel people think, but you're bypassing gummy ship sections to redo it, so it is a fast travel system, at least to me. Another game I'll mention is Xenoblade Chronicles X, where at first you definitely want the fast travel points because of the fact of, well, movement is fast, the characters run fast and jump high in that game, especially for a Xenoblade title, so movement itself isn't necessarily an issue, but it's a fact of, you know, kind of want to fast travel places. But then the game's traversal starts opening more and more. Then you get scales, and they can turn to vehicles, which is even faster if you on foot. Then you get scales that flat out fly, and that's where you just go, oh hell yes, I want to keep doing this, so traverse environment and everything, and there are any enemies that are up in the sky they can now face as a result. You can still fast travel, but it can be generally safe for if it's really far away. But also with the scales, when you're in flight, you do have a unique track that plays. It may or may not annoy you that it overwrites every other track because it always plays, and I'm not sure the Definitive Edition changes that, but that's a hunter aspect. As with the Definitive Edition, they've added a new type of scale that basically functions as a freaking jet. So, yeah, that's one of those games where you ever see people complain about, damn, this game's, I need to fast travel because the explorer is awful. No, exploration is the enjoyment, and the scales is what adds so much to it, on top of just the base movement for the characters because of how fast they run. You can't outrun the enemies though, they will come for your ass. Or they just jump real high, which makes sure to figure out how to get to places is also very enjoyable. Last one I'll mention is the, for recently this year, Atelier Yumia, which not only gives you ability to double and triple jump off of walls, and an upgrade allows you to just triple jump just because, which allows you to just explore stuff, try and find tricks or they freaking get through certain passages, try to barely make it through, play with the geometry, maybe a bit too much to get stuck behind invisible walls like I did, or find yourself glitching into places you weren't supposed to be at all right before the game can give you access to it, but you can do it. And also gives you a motorcycle, where unlike my complaint I had with something like a Saints Row game give you nitro, being like, okay, I think this game is big enough for a nitro boost. This game actually does take into account enough room for the motorcycle to function and boost through, so it is a viable option. You can generally avoid enemies. Granted, some places like, oh, cause a staircase and stuff like that may impede you, but the motorcycle actually works pretty well. Although I wish it too could double and triple jump and then get off of it. In order to do that, can be on the annoying side. But you do have fast travel you can unlock, and like I said, I do use it because, once again, the game on the map is way too huge. But there are points where you want to get a resource along the way, you can just use a motorcycle and immediately just zip through across, or try to go around using your double and triple jump in order to find little nooks and crannies you can squeeze into in order to find extra goodies or extra passageways, sometimes even doing it for the game even teaches you how to do it. So there is benefit to Yumia's movement system that I hope they do more with in future titles. That's just something I want to ramble about, just the fast travel mechanic and how it's basically a system that many games nowadays will include it, especially if the game is way too big. But it's one of those things where, once again, some feel like it's a bad solution for bad traversal mechanics or exploration. But like I said, there are some games where even if the controls are fantastic, you might not want to do it too much, or the fact of the distance may be way too much as a result, so fast travel is there to alleviate that. So it's not purely playing the game is not fun, so here's a don't play the game button. Sometimes it may be the game asking you to do too much, and developers are aware of that, trying to give you the function to just immediately zip through. Although I feel like the kids Spider-Man 2, the fast travel is them just flexing their SSDs. Wait, catch on the PCs. Anywho, that's all I gotta say on the topic. Alright, then, go out there, play some games with fast travel or not fast travel. Depends on which one you want to choose. You want to blip over the way to another segment, or do you want to take the scenic route and have fun? Pick your choice.